All right. We're rocking and rolling.
It is great to meet you, Nikki. I want to get right into it. I want to start off, first off, I appreciate the fact that you're giving your time for this. There are very few instances in my career where I get to talk to rising stars. And what I mean by that is, in this world of content, social media, thought leadership, even, if you want to go as far as influencers or just, these experts in certain spaces, there's probably only been a handful of times in the last 15, 20 years that I've met people as they're on the rise. I usually get to them after the fact that they've written the book or they've gotten the massive, promotion and they're doing these things. Morgan Ingram is one of them. I'm sure you know Morgan.
Yeah.
I met him when he was just starting off SDR Chronicles. There's a handful of people. It's not very many. And so when your name came across, I was like, hey, who's this Nikki person? I did a little research and I was like, holy shit, this is who I want to talk to. Because in this idea, this talk track around building a personal brand, I can talk about things in a very historical context about how I got to where I'm at and how the methods and processes can help anyone. But what I think is even more valuable is to talk to individuals like yourself who are in the middle of doing it right now. Because there's a lot of nuances and thoughts that are going through your heads that I've probably already forgotten about. So I appreciate you taking the time today.
Well, thank you.
So let's start off with a quick introduction. Now, I went through your LinkedIn. You've been in sales for a long time, most of your career. You also did some reporting, it looks like, and then you had some brief instances back and forth with social media, which is all very fascinating to me. Like somebody might look at that resume and say, oh, that's really crazy all over the place. But I'm a big fan of asymmetrical career paths because I think they all build off of each other and help you into whatever that next role is. So I want to start with that. How did you decide to move into the space that you're in now, like in becoming a salesperson, more specifically?
So becoming a salesperson in the first place, that's actually the first, besides Wendy's when I was 15, right? The first real job I had. I was with a friend of mine. She was going to buy a car. We walked onto this car lot and, the salesman was schmoozy. There was a veneer. So, and that personally makes me uncomfortable. I'm always like wanting to get to, the heart of a person or the authenticity, right? Like, can we just be human together? So I resented deeply this veneer this guy had on and his insistence on, being sort of a, beep, bop, bop, boop, beep. I'm going to sell you something. And so I heckled him a little bit and just tried to get him to break character. He wouldn't do it. And so my friend did not walk out with a car, but I walked out of the dealership with a job offer. Turns out that guy's boss was like, I think you got something, kid. So he dug that I was, that I was in on this idea that you've got to connect with people and that I wasn't afraid to go for it. And so that's the beginning of my sales proper career. In terms
Question
of
for you. I want to unpack that for a second. So you're on this lot, you're going through this experience, and did you already have some idea, some self-awareness that you contained this, or did he kind of just notice it and call it attention to you?
I didn't know that I had not considered sales as a career. I didn't ever think of it. Never. And I didn't even recognize, right, the people that I was interacting with as a consumer or prospect. I didn't recognize what they were doing, right, as salespeople. So I didn't really see it as a profession. So it wasn't like I had a built up negative idea about it, just never thought about it. And so, but what I did know, what I had valued for a very long time was connecting with people, was communication. So that I knew I had in me, but I thought it meant that I should be a teacher.
Yeah.
That's actually what I was studying. And it's what all my
It's also very telling about your personality, I bet.
Yes, it is. And so, yeah, so it's what I have been studying. It's what all my work study jobs were in college. But so, and it went back to this, as a young Black girl, I was always observing how, first of all, the absence of people who look like me in positions of authority, And then when people who looked like me were in positions of authority, what was this common thread? And the common thread often was these well-developed communication skills. Sure, there was charisma in there as well, but they got it. They understood that, you know, you have this opportunity to cut through, you know, to the center of someone, and they were doing it with words. So I knew all of that. I just hadn't put it together. And this person at this dealership, I think, kind of saw something. But, you know, that's not the most, at the time at least, and maybe still now. I mean, most cultures, professional cultures, have things that they need to fix. Car sales is one that had a lot that it needed to fix.
Still does.
Yeah, a lot. And, you know, so I'm in Austin, and a few years after this, and I was working 12 hours Saturdays every Saturday. You don't get any Saturdays off. And most of the time working 12-hour days every other day as well. Just that's what it is. If you want to, it's feast or famine in car sales. And I was, you know, selling this car to this gentleman, and my style of selling a car, again, revolved around words, it revolved around connecting with people. So I didn't really talk about the car that much. I don't really know about the cars that much, right? I can't tell you like what kind of engine does this? It has an engine. I can tell you that, right? So that was not my strong
I can read the piece of paper just like you can.
Right, exactly, right? But here on the window, you see all of the features of this vehicle. No, so we would talk about why they were there, right? We'd have a real discovery, and talk about why they were there. And I liked to talk about like what the impact of this vehicle was. And some of my favorite experiences were like folks who were, you know, maybe didn't have the most privileged background. And so as soon as they're put in a situation where maybe they had dropped out of high school, they needed a vehicle, and at this point they're walking to some fast food or retail job, right? But they need this vehicle, and they would talk to me about what it would open up for them. And then once we figure out like, okay, we're clear that you came here to get a vehicle today, I can help you with that. Now you just got to be really honest with me about what position you're in. And once we figure all of that out, then I can make it easy. Then we get in I don't bore you with this talk about this machine. And we get in the car, and I ask you, it's my favorite question to ask, like, okay, when we get into a car, it's two kinds of people, right? They're the people who got to get the AC on first, and they're the people who got to get the music on first. Which one are you? And, you know, they'd tell me which one, and then we'd laugh and we'd talk, and they're driving and imagining themselves in this vehicle, imagining that it's theirs. And we're not, again, we're talking about, we're engaging at the idea level, not people, places, things. And we're feeling something together. And I am being a part of this purchase that's going to be one of the most major of their lives. And I just took all of that seriously, probably maybe more seriously than a car salesperson should. I don't know, but I did. I took it very seriously. So I'm spending time with this gentleman, and he was like, why are you here 12 hours a Saturday? Like, you have a skill set that in the domain where I work would be really valuable. You should meet my boss, and, you know, I think you'd like it. And so his boss is Scott Leese. The place he worked was Outbound Engine. And yeah,
Scott.
Yeah, so the rest is kind of history as far as like me getting into B2B, right? I learned so much. I was only at Outbound Engine for a few months. I mean, you saw my background, right?
Yeah.
But I haven't internalized that as, I guess, as people are supposed to when you have these short stints, because I'm very in touch with what I learned in each of these environments. And as you pointed out earlier, yes, I am building on the things that I'm learning, and I'm always going towards something and not away from something. So I learned a lot in that environment. Number one thing I learned is that I don't actually want to make 150 cold calls a day. I don't actually want to do that, but I do.
I don't know anybody that actually does. There are people who say they do, but I don't know anybody that actually does.
Right. But I learned, there's the way these conversations went, and it was due in large part to, like, Scott Leese is a genius script writer. And so it was due in large part to that, where he would have us asking these questions that would challenge people up front and get us to that rawness that I was craving ever since that day on that car lot. So I learned how good it feels to help someone understand something, which was building on me learning, even like I said, as a child, how impactful communication can be. And now I'm saying, oh, this can be a tool. It doesn't have to be a weapon. It can be a tool, and you can really help people with it. And so that's what attracted me to it. But what, as I alluded to with the 150 call thing, right? There were still gaps, right? If I don't know where this list of 150 people came from, my brain is going to keep asking, why am I reaching out to these people in particular, right? And not because just because I know they're going to ask me that and I want to have something, that sounds good to say, but no, like genuinely I'm interested. Where do leads come from? I wrote a post a while back that said, mommy, where do leads come from? And then the response is like, oh, well, they come from the CRM, babe. Now you better make your phone call so you can grow up and be a nice, strong AE. And it's like, look, I couldn't handle that. That just messed with me. And I think that's what led me, in a way that felt very organic to me, into social and into marketing and trying to understand the interaction between those two functions, right? I didn't know at that time, because I wasn't really heavy on LinkedIn. I wasn't following these conversations. I didn't know that this is something that, as an industry, B2B tech was already trying to figure out, right? Was how to get that interaction right and how to serve each other better as salespeople and marketers. But it was just something that was going on inside of me. So I go ahead.
No, I mean, and that's all fascinating. In fact, I want to have a whole nother conversation with you on just that background, because what you just articulated was exactly the reason I moved out of sales initially and into marketing. It was because I had this love-hate relationship with, in fact, when I first got offered a marketing job, I hadn't applied for it. Somebody approached me for a marketing job. I was like, you don't understand. I hate marketers. Mm-hmm. And they're like, what do you mean? I was like, they're useless. They do nothing. They literally just throw leads at me and make me cold call all day long. And I know how to do this better already. Right. And they're like, no, that's why you're going to be a great marketer. So anyway, that's a whole nother story. Was it around this time, that you moved into tech, or at what point did you realize that a personal brand was a thing, that, Nikki was going to be a name that people remembered or were remembering, and you're like, there's something to this?
So it was right around, it would have been 2018. I was at Qualia working for Scott again. And he had done this optional workshop for the sales team there, for the AEs, on how to present yourself on LinkedIn, right? And how, at the very least, to be building a following. We weren't talking about content marketing necessarily, but he was showing us like how to show up here and be yourself, and then attract folks who believe what you believe. And he had one of his slides was Mark A. Smith, a post of Mark A. Smith's, and it was so authentic and so vulnerable. And I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know you could do that, and that and have it mean something and have an impact on your sales career, have impact on other people. I just had never considered it. So I started there. I started building a network and just putting out content. And some of my earlier videos, they're still there. I was theme song Thursdays. It's me in the parking lot of Qualia, in my car, singing a bit of a song and then relating it to sales or trying to motivate people. So started out that way. And then I got the opportunity at B2B Growth / Sweetfish Media. And James Carberry and Logan Lyles are brilliantly engineering that. They're like, no, this is really it though. This is not an afterthought. This is not, just a byproduct. This is something that you can be really intentional about, and it can impact your reputation, sure, but it can also impact the business significantly. And then that's the light bulb, right? Because the job there, right? I'm hired as an SDR at Sweetfish Media. And the method of prospecting is to reach out to people, say, hey, would you like to be on this podcast, right? And it's a true endeavor, right? It's honest transparency. If they run a podcast, it's one of the most successful, right? So I was looking for folks to be on the podcast who fit as folks who our audience will get something valuable from, but who also fit as folks who look in their business. Are they at a place where they're advancing a thought leadership or brand awareness initiative, where they might be looking at building a podcast? Might we produce podcasts for B2B brands, right? Might it make sense for us to have a conversation? However, instead of the SDR job being, as I had grown to be sort of burnt out from before, instead of me calling people and say, hey, do you want us to produce your podcast? I'm having them on the show to talk about things they care about. There's that talking about ideas thing again. Yeah. Literally, that's the conversation, right? So someone says, yes, they want to be on the show. I say, what are 3 things you want folks who are listening to walk away knowing about you and what your expertise is and what you're passionate about? So we're having this conversation about what they're passionate about. And then when it's over, after we're done recording, I've done a little research, of course. Look, I saw, you posted this, and that the other day, and it looks like you're trying to, advance this. By the way, this was hilarious that you posted. Have you thought about podcasting at all? And so we're already having this conversation, and I just set a meeting for them to talk to Look. So I was like, this is fish in a barrel. This is how you get to people. If I was an SDR and sent these same people an email or a cold call, would have taken, because you're talking about like Max Altschiller, right? You're talking about folks, some of the busiest people in B2B revenue. I just wasn't going to be able to get a hold of them. So by the time I interview Latney Conan of 6 Sense, I'm already thinking about this and trying to build something to that effect at Sweetfish, right? Trying to bulk up this content marketing for our own sake, right? As opposed to just for that one show, because they produce lots of shows. But anyway, I interviewed Latney, and she offered at the end of the call, like, listen, if you need help, mentorship, anything, reach out to me. I didn't think anything of it. But what I did, because as I said, I was trying to build this content marketing thing and just sort of testing things out. I used Headliner. I made a little clip of my episode with Latney, wrote some copy around it and posted it. And the post did really well. So well, in fact, right, Latney is having people tag her in it. And so I'm getting this attention of this person. This part I can't even claim I engineered. All I really wanted was to get more folks downloading the show and get more folks saying, yes, they want to be on, so I can get more meetings for Logan. But then I'm seeing the bigger potential, right? So Latney calls me she emails me at like 1 o'clock in the morning, like, hey, you ever thought about being a marketer? And that's when I take this opportunity to help them build awareness before their last round of funding over at 6 Sense. And there is where it all really came together. So I had been seeing this connection between sales development and marketing from what I was doing at Sweetfish, right? And I thought, okay, this is the holy grail. This is how it works. But what I saw at 6 Sense took it to the next level. So as a top of funnel marketer, if I'm working with, say, the customer marketing team, and we've got an event coming up, and they are wanting this particular set of folks who's coming to the event to be talking about it, I'm running recon. I'm following those people from the 6 Sense social page. I'm listening to what they're talking about. I'm, commenting, retweeting them, and having these conversations, and then giving that intel to the customer marketing team so that they can have this deeper, more personalized understanding of the folks who they want to stay in front of and who they want to delight. And then with the BDR team on the pre-sales part of this, right? The same idea that I learned at Sweetfish, right? Who are the folks who won't answer your email? Let's figure out what they're talking about on, yes, LinkedIn, but on Twitter, on Instagram. Let's figure that out and see if there's something that we can really get to click with them. And then once we started to do that, and I started to see, instances of folks saying, hey, I was also obviously producing the content for the business pages for 6 Sense. And so whether it was that someone responded to some copy that I wrote based on things I had heard folks that fit our ICP saying because I was listening in social, or whether it was directly someone saying, this person on your BDR team posted this video about you guys getting funding. We haven't talked in a while, but we should. I was like, oh, okay, this is powerful. And so Absolutely. I just have taken that and then COVID hit, and I was like 6 months unemployed, but with like this heart and this mind for this next frontier of how sales development is going to be executed. And it happens to be a more personal approach, and we happen to be, because of COVID, and I think how the sales folks as a community have drawn closer to each other, we're in a place where that's what everybody's craving anyway. So the stars just kind of aligned, and I did a little work, I guess, on the front end to position myself and do it. But I can't say that I knew it would turn into anything that it's turned into now. But yeah, it came down to value and communication and just deciding to be myself.
And so what would you tell your younger self? I mean, even if you just go back 5 years, right? Like, was there a struggle? Was there an apprehension or a fear that you had to overcome to become the Nikki Ivey I'm sitting in front of today?
But for sure. So a lot of it is, I think people underestimate the impact of representation. So there are implicit messages sent if you don't see people who look like you represented in, positions of leadership or specific roles that you want. So marketing is an area that at least from my vantage point, seemed a little more diverse than sales. I would say in terms of gender, maybe a lot more diverse, especially in terms of who we see prominently, right? When I was interviewing folks on B2B growth, for instance, I would find women who were marketers in leading the field or visible or had some measure of a brand, much tougher to find that on the sales side, especially in the C-suite. And so when I started to sort of think about where I could impact that, a lot of this sort of came from that organically. But as far as the struggle is concerned, yes, not seeing folks who looked like me sent me this implicit message that maybe there's a ceiling. And then there's just personal insecurities, right? I thought people aren't going to take me seriously. I was a teen mom, and I think I took a lot of that with me when I went into the sort of situations with this chip on my shoulder. It's so more than color or race or even gender, just background. I don't
just
fit.
The baggage, exactly.
I just don't fit.
To that point, like it's like imposter syndrome or other variations of it.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like I never graduated from college, and I know that literally held me back in my career because I let it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of examples of people's backgrounds that I've come across. Like you were just explaining, like it's nothing that is real. It's literally just in your own head, and that's stopping you from even taking that chance.
Yeah, and if I can be really candid with you, a lot of it, looking back, was a learned deference to male leadership, knowing the answer, deferring it to them anyway, and not allowing myself to see myself as a leader. I said out loud a couple of times, like, I don't think I want that leadership position because, I don't know if I want to manage people. People won't do what I say. They won't take me seriously. I don't even know where any of that came from, but I believed it for so long. And then at a certain point, I just had to start to pay attention to how folks are responding to me, because people have been willing me to be a leader. They see it. And so then, what are you going to do? At a certain point, I just didn't have a choice.
I just met you, and I've only really known about you for 2 weeks, maybe 3, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. I immediately saw it, which is why I was so happy to have you even interested in having the conversation. I wasn't joking. Like there are very few occasions where I get to talk to a rising star, and you've already hit a level of success. I'm seeing your name in a lot of places. You're on a speaking circuit, talking on different webinars. About a bunch of different topics, and all these topics are extremely important, from diversity and inclusion to being the advocate for the SDR role, and then just the roles within that, like the tasks within that. Like you're becoming a voice in a space that I think there's a need for it, and so it's exciting to see you kind of making that rise, and your personal brand, even though you've already identified it, like. What you're doing now is going to set you up for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And my only regret for looking back, like I wish I started earlier. I wish I'd started in my 20s, because, I look at individuals like yourself and like the Jack Kostkowskis and the Morgan Ingrams. And I think to myself, oh my gosh, these guys are going to be the rock stars in the industry. And you're one of them.
I wish I started. I mean, this is late I'm 38. I will be 39 years old in November. And that's another, thing that was in my mind a lot of the time. I mean, can you imagine? I would be on a sales floor in my 30s, mid to late 30s, where most of the other salespeople there, not only am I the only Black woman most of the time, I'm the only like person with adult, you know what I mean? Like things going on. Like I just celebrated my 15th wedding anniversary. I have 4 kids. And so a lot of the ways that teams build socially in sales culture were closed off,
or not
me,
conducive for a parent. No, I feel the exact same way. Yeah, no, they're not.
Right.
Like, I got to get home. There's dinners. I got to put kids to bed. One of them might be sick, so I can't come in. Like, there's a lot of the workforce that just does not understand that. Like, it's another language.
Yeah. And so like, that's again another one of the things that I wish I had just ahead of time worn more as a badge of honor, versus being like it being such a point of tension when someone asks me simple stuff. Like they'd be like, oh, you have kids? How many kids do you have? Then I tell them, I have 4. My oldest is 21, and people do the math. And, you know, I have to be over a certain age to have a 21-year-old, but then I had to be under a certain age when I had. So it's just all these things. One of the things that really helped me, though, and another reason why I think representation is important, is when I worked at Level Set, and you wouldn't have seen this one on my LinkedIn, because I was there for a very short amount of time before going to Sweetfish. But I was at this company called Level Set in Austin. They work, they're empowering construction subcontractors to get paid on time. So I really believe in the mission. And they're out of Louisiana. So the gentleman who founded that company overheard a conversation like the one that I just described. And he walks up and he's like, oh, my mom was a teen mom. Yeah, she was 16 when she had me involved. And this is the CEO of the company, right? And so it had an impact on me. And I'm like, I'm carrying this around thinking that people are gonna, think something negative about me, and maybe some of them will, but thinking that it really even matters at all. And here the person that runs the thing, who hired me, is like celebrating this as, here are the things you've overcome. He seemed to understand what must have had to happen in order for me to be in the same room as these other people. So that was another little piece that I'm glad happened right before B2B growth, so I could start my meteoric rise to fame.
Rise to fame. So, in respect for time, what's next? What's next for Nikki? Where are you going to take this next? What's your North Star that you're kind of moving towards now?
There's 2 paths that I have not decided on one. One of them is an entrepreneurial path. And I think that one is the one that seems more real to me now, both more real than the other option and more real than it ever has before. I'm starting to see how the things that I know how to do and like to do are valuable independent of whatever organization I'm working for. I actually have COVID and being unemployed for a while to thank for that. It challenged me to think about what am I good at and to whom can I make that matter to be able to take care of my family and be happy. So there's this entrepreneurial path where SDR Defenders becomes a startup consultancy. And my contribution in that consultancy is helping folks as they're starting up build a diverse team of SDRs from the beginning to fuel what they're trying to do, and install a healthy culture to fuel what they're trying to do. Because when I started to think about what were the things that I would have wanted when I entered this career that were missing, those are the things. So that's the entrepreneurial path. The other path is to be a CMO of a Fortune 500 company. And that one seems far-fetched, but the reason why it's a CMO, I think I've kind of made that case for you already, but is because so many first of all, of my favorite revenue leaders are marketers, are marketing executives in the C-suite. A lot of them are women. I mean, I'm talking about, Dara Tersetter, who just went from Carbon Black to Peloton. And you have Bozoma St. John, who went from, I think, Uber and is now at Netflix. There's a woman named Yoli Chisholm at Sprinkler. These are all Black women who are CMOs and who are making things happen and inspiring me, and they don't even know who I am. I have this little exercise I do. On my LinkedIn, I sent a connection request to Bozoma St. John, which she, of course, doesn't know even exists. So I just open it up and it still says pending. but it motivates me every day to see like Bozema St. John pending, because it means so many different things for me. And so I don't have that dream or that idea narrowed down into the steps it would take to get there, except for just being really good at the job that I'm doing right now and to the people that I'm surrounded by right now.
That is an amazing close right there. That was a very impactful and empowering statement. And, you know, it's going to sound like I'm gushing with, you know, with accolades for you, but I don't think either of those goals are out of reach for you. You know, I think about the CMOs out there and, you know, just my own marketing journey. These other CMOs, like, and I see it in sales as well, but especially even more with marketers, like we want to help out the future generations. And I think sales leadership to some extent, but they have this bag that they have to carry every single month and they have numbers to hit. So they don't have as much time, they don't think. Whereas I think on the marketing side, there's more of a desire to want to lift everyone up. So it wouldn't surprise me if all these CMOs that you're reaching out to, eventually they're going to take your acceptance, your connection request. You're going to find ways to get in front of them. Like you have that skill set already in place. So with that, I want to thank you for your time.